The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Rashad Mohammed Al-Alimi, President of the Presidential Leadership Council of the Republic of Yemen. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Rashad Mohammed Al-Alimi, President of the Presidential Leadership Council of the Republic of Yemen, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of God, the most merciful, Your Majesties, Your Highnesses, Excellencies, President of the General Assembly, Secretary General, Sir, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, may the peace of God be upon you all. First and foremost, I would like to congratulate His Excellency, Mr. Sabah Kursi, as well as Hungary, a friendly state, on its election to the head of the UN General Assembly. I'd like to wish him every success in the work of this session. This session is on transformative solutions to interlocking challenges. I'd also like to congratulate his predecessor, Mr. Abdullah Shahid from the Maldives, for his real efforts to the principles and goals of the organization. I'd also like to welcome the role played by His Excellency, the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, who strengthened the presence of the United Nations on the international stage. I would like to thank all UN staff, as well as agencies and envoys and emissaries, for all their efforts to alleviate the suffering of the Yemeni people. We'd also like to thank them for their good offices and for their efforts to bring peace and stability to my country, which has been drained by 8 years of wars caused by the Houthi terrorists supported by the Iranian regime. I would like to commend the great Yemeni people, and I'd like to take this opportunity to do so, who are celebrating several national days, the 26th of October and the 30th of November. All of these various dates have constituted key states in cultural and social progress in my country. Inter alia, the proclamation of the Republican regime. This is currently undermined by the Houthi coup 60 years after the proclamation, which is based on freedom, justice, the eradication of racial discrimination, and also focuses on women's participation and guarantees of rights and liberty. It is a great pleasure for me to speak to you today, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time as the President of the Presidential Leadership Council of 8. For the 8th year in a row, a Yemeni leader is telling you about the destruction, humanitarian crisis, which is the worst in the world in Yemen. Each time we come to you to share with you all of this suffering, all of this pain, and also bring the memory of the courageous leaders and women, children, work colleagues, all those people that we are losing day after day because of the war, epidemics, illness, and hunger. Each time that a year passes without a robust position being taken on Yemen, losses pile up, militias and terrorist groups become increasingly dangerous and are a real transnational threat. These militias violate human rights, whilst these rights have been the subject of consensus within this organization for more than 70 years now. I'm here today to share with you the same history, the history of the Yemeni people, this great people, a patient, perseverant people that have been hit so hard. They're asking the same questions. Is it not possible to undertake serious work to bring an end to the bloodshed, to save lives, to eradicate terrorism, radicalism and extremism, and to protect the desire of the people and its legitimate aspirations to recover its state, to participate in political life, to live a normal life, to get rid of sectarian, religious and hate speech as well. The international community, ladies and gentlemen, has adopted a unified position on the issue of Yemen. We do appreciate this, and we are grateful to you for that. First and foremost, you supported the transfer of power plan based on the Gulf Initiative and its implementation mechanism in 2011. And then there was the Conference of National Dialogue that was not exclusive. This dialogue was something in which all categories of society was involved, including the Houthis, and this led to a reference document guaranteeing people's participation as broad as possible, indeed, in this process. This document enshrined the aspirations of the Yemeni people for democracy, justice, equality in citizenship, and women's participation, and the participation of all social categories, the freedom of thought and belief. And this led to a renewal of the Security Council that took place in Sana'a in 2013. Unfortunately, this dream was very short-lived, following a terrorist coup d'etat that was conducted by the Houthi militia. They had a coup d'etat against national consensus that was born from this dialogue. These militia prevented the new constitution, and that would have led to a referendum. They tried to invade the capital Sana'a and several towns in Yemen. They also created obstacles to national agreement, in particular in Aden. They tried to assassinate the President of the Republic, and they harmed the work of several state Yemeni institutions. They imposed a fait accompli upon them. The militia declared a war on neighboring countries. This is how this destructive war started. This is the real threat to stability in our region, a threat to international navigation routes, to energy supply. All of this led to hundreds of thousands of lives lost, to people being injured, to a situation where 20 million people are currently suffering from famine. There are hundreds of thousands of refugees who've had to seek refuge in neighboring countries. 4 million IDPs within Yemen itself. The Houthi militia destroyed the living conditions for people, the means of subsistence for people. Furthermore, other phenomena have exacerbated the suffering of our people, in particular climate change, and also the destruction of our social network, our social welfare system. Ladies and gentlemen, since the 7th of April, a new era has started in Yemen based on partnership and national consensus through the establishment of the Presidential Leadership Council. This strives to make progress according to the terms of the transition period adopted by our people and approved by the regional and international community. This is why we are making progress, and we're doing this through an alliance conducted by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, and also the different regional and international partners, to set up reform programs, they're urgently needed, that breathe new life into our institutions and ensure that services be provided at a large scale, whilst trying to curb the plummet in the exchange rate of our national currency. We're also trying to tackle inflation and the international food crisis. We've prioritized rebuilding our security and military institutions and to rebuild the judicial power that stopped functioning for about 2 years. Ladies and gentlemen, we are working within the terms of reference of the Gulf initiative and its implementation mechanism, as well as decisions, in particular 2216 of the Security Council, that resolution which calls for lasting peace and enables the state to recover its authority throughout the entire territory through our constitution and our republican system. Here, we would like to reaffirm our full respect for international humanitarian law, international human law and human rights, international human rights law, rather, and the various different instruments and treaties adopted and ratified by the Republic of Yemen. We would like to work hand in hand with the United Nations and the international community to ensure that peace, security, stability, and prosperity and freedom for all our peoples and all peoples of the world return. Our Presidential Council acts today in line with the UN Charter and its aims and principles, as well as in cooperation with UN agencies and the UN's political missions to guarantee, inter alia, political, economic and social rights of women and to bring an end to child exploitation. Children are often indoctrinated as part of hostile activities. Ladies and gentlemen, since the start of the Yemeni crisis, we have experienced great pain. We have sought to combat the Houthi militia. We've always maintained the same goal, and that is of peace. The Houthis did not respect their commitments, in particular their commitments made in 2014 in Sana'a. There were Geneva meetings, the first and second Geneva meetings. There were the Kuwait consultations, those in Stockholm. Then there was the truce, during which we nonetheless lost 300 martyrs, and there were violations by the militia that caused at least 1,000 people to be injured. For some week now, the humanitarian truce has stopped. We would like the international community to take into consideration that the Yemeni government did respect the truce throughout its existence. Today, we have sought to avoid any excuse. There's no excuse to violate this truce. We want a lasting peace. This truce showed that indeed we do lack a serious partner within Yemen. We lack serious partners who want peace. The Yemenis know today that they absolutely need to combat sectarian armed groups. Today we insist on the strong position of the Yemeni Presidential Council. We are calling for a renewal of the truce. However, this must not take place if it is not in the interests of the Yemeni people. The terrorist militia must not gain power because they threaten not only Yemen, but the whole region and indeed the entire world. For us, ladies and gentlemen, peace is a strategic choice. There's no doubt about this. We are perfectly aware of the difficulty of heading up our country without the participation of all components of Yemeni society. However, we cannot accept an armed militia having the monopoly of power. These are the very basis of the aspirations of the Yemeni people. They have a right to peace and stability, just like all peoples do throughout the world. Today, the militia want to place themselves above the state, above the Yemeni people. Indeed, they believe that they have been elected by God. They export violence across the borders. They export hate speech and hostility against others, everybody who is different to them. Your countries, perhaps for some time now, have been living in peace and prosperity. That's perhaps why it's difficult for you to understand the situation in Yemen, where a militia is proclaiming itself as being chosen, elected by God. This war against us This is precisely what the Houthis, Daesh, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, and many other terrorist groups throughout the world are calling for. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, transformative solutions, which are the theme of this General Assembly session, first and foremost require the principles of peace to be upheld with the existence of a stable government, one that can protect the political process. Nonetheless, if we continue to fear the use of force against terrorism, well, that will lead to a humanitarian disaster. In truth, we need to find alternative solutions. Deterrence, indeed. The international community needs to support the legitimate government in order to ensure that the values of peace and peaceful coexistence prevail. Diplomacy is based on an exchange of points of view. We cannot implement diplomacy. We can only do this in the context of a legitimate regime. It is difficult to use diplomacy with terrorist militias. If we were to, we would undermine the very principles of this organization. Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps the world's eyes are not looking at Yemen at the moment because there are other hotbeds of tension throughout the world. However, generous and attentive partners have, through the coalition headed up by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the UAE, they have helped us. They have spared no effort, no resource has been spared to help us on behalf of the international community to protect our people. They have also hosted Yemeni refugees, and they have been given many advantages in those countries. Furthermore, a technocratic government was set up alongside the Presidential Council. This government enjoys the support of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. There have also been many commitments undertaken by the United States and the European Union and also the United Kingdom. They have undertaken to finance many processes in Yemen. Nonetheless, we are experiencing a real gap in funding. We need humanitarian emergency assistance, in particular in the area of healthcare. We also need a rapid response from humanitarian organizations. That is why projects need to be invested in that allow Yemeni people to enjoy means of subsistence and to protect the central bank in Aden so that the currency can be protected, so that basic products can be protective, so that a potential famine can be warded off. We need to act against the Houthi militias who are trying to divert or rather, we need to address the safer oil tanker situation. This would lead to a particularly serious environmental disaster. It would be a crisis even worse than the one we experienced in the Atlantic Ocean following the oil spill from the Exxon Valdez vessel. There's a need to make more efforts to bring an end to this situation that is being used by the Houthis as a tool to exert pressure. We are calling upon all countries of the world to ensure free navigation in international waters. We're also calling for a combat to be conducted against the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, in particular by the Islamic Republic of Iran. Today, Iran is interfering in our domestic affairs in an absolutely unacceptable way. That is why sanctions against that country need to be respected in line with the law and international commitments. We would call upon the states of the international community to reach agreement on nuclear non-proliferation and to ensure that no military aid be given to Iran, in particular through the provision of drones that are currently being used in terrorist acts against the citizens of my country and of countries in the region. By the same token, the Houthi militia are planting anti-personnel mines in the sea and on land. That is why the Republic of Yemen would like to urge the states of the international community to respect disarmament. Thus, we would like to talk about the need to find a solution on the Palestinian question so that the rights of the Palestinian people can be guaranteed. Ladies and gentlemen, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights enshrines the respect for the dignity of each human being in it. This is the very basis of freedom, justice, and peace throughout the world. This is why there is a need to prioritize these rights in all action of the General Assembly. The aim here is to guarantee the dignity of thousands, hundreds of thousands of our citizens throughout the world who are displaced, who are refugees, who are the subject of numerous forms of violence. Do we need to show even more evidence to show that violence is carried out by the Houthis? There is abuse carried out by these militia. In conclusion, I would like to tell you a story. Quite recently, a young Yemeni man was in Cairo in Egypt, and he was asked his date of birth by doctors. He said that he was born just 2 weeks ago, and this is the date when he left Sana'a. So he was born again, so to speak, after he left Yemen, but nonetheless he was afflicted by the loss of his family and by having to leave all of his family behind. In Yemen, the Yemeni people aspire for peace, they aspire for a peaceful future, and this is what all countries of the world want for their populations. Thank you very much. May God's blessing be with you.
Leadership Council of the Republic of Yemen for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Tanete Maamau,